Long before Ravenscroft Castle became a ruin half swallowed by ivy and time, it stood as a dark sentinel above the moorlands, its towers cutting into the sky like broken teeth. Even now, locals lower their voices when speaking its name, though few can say why. The truth of what happened there in 1675 survives only in fragmented testimonies, a sealed court record, and a handful of accounts never meant to be read together. What follows is not legend. It is what remains after careful omission. Ravenscroft Castle was already old by the 17th century, built on a rise of black stone overlooking a stretch of barren land where nothing grew easily. It had changed hands many times. Each family that ruled there added walls, towers, and chambers, as though trying to fortify something more than the structure itself. By 1675, the castle belonged to Lord Edmund Ravenscroft, a man described in surviving letters as learned, private, and deeply attentive to the movements of the heavens. He employed astrologers, mathematicians, and scholars, whose names appear nowhere else in regional records. Villagers rarely saw these men leave the castle grounds. What they did notice was the change in the castle's behavior. Sound from Ravenscroft began to carry strangely across the moors. Bells rang at odd hours, yet no service followed. Fires burned through the night in the upper towers, casting long, shifting shadows across the surrounding land. On certain evenings, the castle windows appeared dark despite visible torchlight within, as though the light had been swallowed before reaching the glass. By late summer, rumors spread of preparations underway for something unusual. Servants were dismissed in stages. Supplies were brought in and sealed away. Windows in the lower halls were shuttered permanently. Lord Ravenscroft issued instructions that no one was to leave the castle grounds during the nights leading up to the coming blood moon. Few questioned him. Those who remained inside the castle later testified to an atmosphere of mounting pressure, as though the walls themselves were listening. Corridors felt narrower. Ceilings seemed lower at night. Several servants reported the sensation of being watched from behind, only to find their own shadows stretching in unnatural directions, detached from their movements. The first shadow was reported 3 nights before the blood moon. A kitchen maid swore she saw a figure standing at the end of the western hall after dusk, tall, unmoving, darker than the surrounding dark. When she approached with a candle, the figure did not retreat. Instead, it thinned, stretching along the stone floor before disappearing beneath a door that led nowhere. She was dismissed the next morning. Others followed. A guard claimed his shadow lagged behind him while climbing the eastern stairwell, pausing on landings he had already passed. Another reported seeing silhouettes gathered along the battlements during a moonless night, standing shoulder to shoulder, though no men had been posted there. Lord Ravenscroft recorded none of this directly. What he did record were observations of alignment. In his personal journal, recovered much later, he wrote of the castle's foundations resonating differently as the moon waxed. He described the stone as responsive, capable of holding impressions left by repeated action and focused intent. The blood moon, he believed, would act as a catalyst, a moment when boundaries thinned and latent structures revealed themselves. To what end, he never stated plainly. On the night of the blood moon, the castle was sealed. Witnesses from the surrounding villages later testified to seeing every window darkened as the moon rose red and heavy above the moors. No torchlight, no movement. Ravenscroft Castle appeared hollow, like a shell abandoned by its inhabitants. Then the chanting began. It did not travel outward as sound normally does. Those closest to the castle described it as pressure rather than noise, a rhythmic compression of the air that caused ears to ring and chests to tighten. Animals panicked. Dogs refused to approach the hill. Horses broke their tethers. Inside the castle, the ritual unfolded in the Great Hall. Accounts differ on the number present. Some say a dozen men stood in a circle carved into the stone floor. Others insist there were more, too many to count, figures whose faces could not be remembered clearly after the fact. What all accounts agree on is the light. Candles burned black at the edges, shadows stretched upward instead of outward, climbing the walls and ceiling as though seeking purchase. The moonlight that filtered through the high windows did not illuminate the room so much as outline it, leaving the center in a depthless gloom. Lord Ravenscroft stood at the center. As the moon reached its apex, the shadows detached. They did not leap or lunge. They unfolded. Figures rose from the floor, from the walls, from the corners where light never reached. Tall, thin silhouettes, lacking detail, lacking faces, yet unmistakably attentive. They moved with deliberation, positioning themselves along the perimeter of the hall as if responding to an unspoken instruction. Those who later described the scene struggled for language. They said the figures were not creatures, nor spirits in the usual sense. They were absences given outline, places where light refused to settle. The chanting ceased. In the sudden silence, witnesses reported hearing something else, an internal sound, like breath held too long. The shadows leaned inward. Lord Ravenscroft raised his hands. What he intended to say next was never recorded. At that moment, the castle shuddered, not violently, but profoundly. Stone groaned. The floor warmed beneath bare feet. Several participants collapsed, clutching their heads, screaming of corridors opening beneath them. Outside, villagers saw the castle's silhouette distort briefly against the blood-red moon, its towers appearing to bend inward before snapping back into place. Then everything went dark. By dawn, Ravenscroft Castle stood silent. No smoke rose from its chimneys. No guards answered calls. When villagers finally entered, they found the great hall empty. No bodies, no signs of struggle. Candles burned down to stubs. The carved circle in the floor was warm to the touch, and along the walls, where shadows should have fallen, the stone was unnaturally smooth, as if something had passed repeatedly through it, wearing it down from the inside. The castle was never occupied again. But this was not the end. In the days that followed, Ravenscroft Castle became an object of careful distance. No official inquiry was announced, though a sealed document preserved in the county assize records confirms that a delegation was sent quietly, instructed to observe rather than interfere. Their findings were brief. The castle showed no sign of siege or fire. Stores remained untouched. Beds were unrumpled. Meals had been prepared and left to cool, as though the inhabitants had stepped away mid-motion. Every door stood closed. Every lock was intact, yet no living soul remained inside. More unsettling still was the condition of the shadows. Observers noted that light, entering the halls, behaved unpredictably. Sunbeams bent along walls instead of striking the floor. Corners appeared darker than shadow should allow, absorbing illumination without reflection. Several men reported the sensation of being followed by something that left no mark behind them. One magistrate refused to enter the great hall at all. He claimed the space felt occupied, despite its emptiness, as though the absence itself had mass. The carved circle in the floor became the focus of attention. Its grooves were smooth, not chiseled but worn, as if something had traced them countless times over many years. Measurements taken around it varied slightly with each attempt. No two men recorded the same diameter. When a candle was placed at its center, the flame leaned inward. The delegation left Ravenscroft within a day. Their report recommended the castle be sealed and left to ruin. No further mention of Lord Ravenscroft was made in official correspondence. His title passed to a distant relative who declined to claim the estate. But rumors did not remain confined to paper. Shepherds grazing their flocks near the hill reported seeing figures at dusk, dark outlines moving along the castle walls where no one stood. Travelers passing at night described the sensation of being watched from above, accompanied by the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps that matched their own pace. In some accounts, the figures appeared only during the full moon. In others, they gathered during heavy cloud cover, when shadows had no natural source. One witness, questioned years later, claimed the figures did not move freely. They repositioned themselves, as though adjusting to something unseen, maintaining alignment rather than pursuit. In 1692, a traveling minister attempted to cleanse the castle grounds. He conducted prayers at the base of the hill, refusing to step within the walls. According to his own testimony, the air grew thick as he spoke, pressing against his lungs until he could no longer continue. He fled before completing the rite. The minister later confessed that he had seen his shadow detach from his feet and remain behind as he retreated, standing upright and motionless near the gate. He did not return to retrieve it. As decades passed, Ravenscroft fell further into disrepair. Stones loosened, towers collapsed inward. Yet even as the structure decayed, certain areas resisted ruin. The Great Hall remained intact far longer than engineering could explain. Its walls bore no cracks. Its floor retained a faint warmth, even in winter. By the 18th century, the blood moon ritual had become an unspoken subject among scholars of forbidden history. Those who studied celestial alignments noted that 1675 marked an unusual convergence, one that repeated only at long, irregular intervals. Some speculated that Lord Ravenscroft had not summoned something into the castle, but opened a condition within it, a space where shadows could exist without light. One manuscript, discovered in a private collection in the early 19th century, contained marginal notes believed to be written in Ravenscroft's own hand. The text was fragmented, much of it deliberately obscured. Yet one passage survived intact. Shadows are not the absence of light. They are the presence of structure. If this was the guiding principle of the ritual, then its success lay not in destruction, but in transformation. In 1811, during a particularly harsh winter, travelers reported seeing candlelight within Ravenscroft Castle for the first time in over a century. Those who approached found no source. The light receded as they advanced, withdrawing deeper into the ruins until it vanished altogether. In 1844, a pair of antiquarians entered the Great Hall to sketch its layout. Only one returned. He claimed his companion stepped into the carved circle and simply stopped responding. When the survivor looked away and back again, the man was gone, leaving only his shadow pressed unnaturally flat against the stone. The sketch was never completed. Modern examinations of Ravenscroft are rare. Access to the site is discouraged, though no official prohibition exists. Those who have visited speak of an oppressive stillness, of sound fading too quickly, of the unsettling feeling that certain places within the ruins prefer to remain unlit. Thermal imaging conducted briefly in the late 20th century recorded unexplained heat signatures along the Great Hall floor, elongated shapes that shifted position over time. The data was dismissed as equipment error, yet locals know better. They say that during a blood moon, when clouds thin and the land holds its breath, the shadows return to their places. They gather where the ritual once unfolded, aligning themselves carefully, waiting for something that has not yet finished. They are not hostile. They are attentive. Because whatever Lord Ravenscroft opened that night was never closed. The castle did not empty. It rearranged itself. And the shadows that walk its halls are not remnants of the past, but participants, still holding their positions, still preserving a structure that exists just beyond the reach of light. If you ever find yourself near Ravenscroft during a blood moon, do not bring a lantern, do not cast a shadow, and And above all, do not stand still long enough for one to choose you, because some rituals do not end. They wait.